After talking to a rep at Tokina USA about their ATX zoom lenses that I reviewed a few months back, they asked me if I've ever shot on their Vista One line of lenses. Now, to make a long story short, not long after that conversation, FedEx delivered a box containing the Tokina Vista One 35mm cinema lens that you see right here. Now, this is by no means a scientific lens test. I'm just super excited to share with you guys my thoughts on this lens, as well as show you some footage that I shot for my client, Ferrata Wheels, using a Zcam E2S6 equipped with this lens. But before we do that, I want to share with you guys a short piece that I filmed with a model down at the Brickell City Center in Miami.
Of a dream life, never been a runner, held back and held it under, waiting for the right time to bring it all into the light. If I fall on, if I fall on, like the world was ending, would we pretend that it's alright? Would you stay, would you stay? Would you stay through the night? Through the night. Just stay, would you stay? Through the night. Would you stay? Would you stay? Would you be my lifeline? I'm yours if you be mine. Would you stay?
Now, before I dive into the specs of this lens, I'd like to introduce myself to all of you guys who are new to this channel. My name is Joe, and I'm a filmmaker based in South Florida. I own a video production company by the name of Driven Films, where I service primarily the automotive industry. On this YouTube channel, I bring you honest, unbiased, and to-the-point reviews of the camera gear that I use day in and day out on professional jobs. Now, if that's something you're interested in, please be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any more videos just like this one. So now what you guys have all been waiting for, we're gonna be talking about this amazing lens here, and this is the Tokina Vista One, and they sent me the 35mm version. Now, one very important distinction for the Vista One is that it is a big image circle lens. What that means is that yes, it covers a full frame sensor, however, it also covers larger than full frame, and hence the term beyond full frame that Tokina is using. The Vista One line of lenses covers VistaVision, Alexa LF, as well as 65mm digital. Now, that is an insane amount of coverage, so seeing as this is a full frame lens and beyond, I felt that it would be only right for me to shoot on a full frame camera, so I ended up renting the Zcam E2F6. So just bullet pointing a few specs on the Vista One, it comes in at T1.5, so these are very, very fast lenses with a constant maximum aperture of T22. Now, this is across the board on all 7 lenses. Also, you have the 114 outer diameter with 112mm filter thread. So if I have a circular filter, I can add that if I'd like to, or I could simply use my matte box directly onto the lens. Another important thing to note is that all 7 lenses across the Vista One lineup have identical gearing position. This is very important considering that you may have a focus and iris motor, a fizz system basically, or a follow focus setup. And if you have it on your camera here with a set of rails and you have your motor or follow focus, you don't want to have to change the position of your focus motors every time you switch your lens. So thanks to the gearing being in the same position across the board on all 7 lenses, you don't have to do so. So it definitely saves a bit of the headache and cuts down on time. Now, when it comes to mount types, the version that I have here is the PL version. However, you can get this lens in an EF mount, Micro Four Thirds, as well as Sony E mount, which makes this an incredibly versatile lens. And I don't believe that this has the user interchangeable lens mounts that the ATX zooms have. So this is not something that I would feel comfortable messing with myself. So if it came down to swapping these lenses or the mounts, I would send this lens in to a professional to take care of the mounting. But again, you can get it in PL, Micro Four Thirds, EF, and Sony E. Now in terms of the weight, this lens is pretty damn heavy, and it is pretty large, and it comes in at about 4.5 pounds and a little bit heavier for the other mount versions. So if you are using it on a gimbal, you're going to be needing to use a heavier duty gimbal. I ended up using this with my Movi Pro to film some car footage for Ferrata wheels, and overall I ended up having to use quite a few counterweights because this lens is much heavier than just the camera body alone. I also did some handheld work, quite a bit of handheld work without an easy rig, and I would tell you that the combined weight of the rig, not even fully rigged out, was quite a bit. So again, this is a very, very heavy lens. Now, just like its sibling, the Vista Prime series, the Vista One has an all metal housing that simply screams, I'm high end. Now, the differentiation between the Vista Prime series and the Vista One is that the Vista One has this really nice just gray and blue finish. But overall, I think this is an incredibly well-built lens. Now, in terms of the focus and iris rings, they are incredibly smooth and allow for very, very precise pulls. Now, just to illustrate this, when my first AC Justin had shot on this lens or was pulling focus for me with this lens, and we switched to a different lens, which I'm not going to name, he simply said that he never wants to pull focus on another lens ever again. So that's just showing you how smooth and precise these rings are. In terms of all the markings, I think that Tokina did a very good job of keeping the markings at a good distance so they're not crowded together like some other lenses are. And when you basically pull your aperture, when you adjust your aperture, you're not gonna go from T1.5 to 5.6 in just a slight pull, which some other lenses that I've been using unfortunately do have that. There is honestly not much more I can say about the build quality aside from the fact that it is just a very, very well built lens. In fact, if we're going to nitpick here, I feel like this plastic cap here for the back cap is a little bit cheap. I think that I've seen some higher quality back caps, but again, I am so just nitpicking here. This is, again, just a very well-built lens. Now, when it comes to characteristics and how this lens shoots, I'm gonna address the two most common questions that I get asked when it comes to a lens test. Now, first up is chromatic aberration. How is it? To be honest with you, it is virtually non-existent. Around T1.5 shooting wide open, you might see very, very little bit, but that's for you pixel peepers. The moment you stop down, even just one stop or even less, any hint of chromatic aberration is absolutely gone. Now, the second question is, how is the focus breathing? In the test that I did with the Tokina Vista One, I found virtually no focus breathing as advertised. But that goes without saying, considering that this is a premium $8,000 lens, so I would expect a lens of this magnitude to basically have little to no focus breathing whatsoever. So now that we've talked about all of the specs, we've talked about the chromatic aberration and the focus breathing, I want to talk to you guys about my favorite part of the Tokina Vista One, and that is simply its character. Now, when it comes to color tone, the Tokina Vista One leans a bit towards the warmer side, which, to be honest with you, I really prefer. Now, keep that in mind when you are matching with other lenses. Chances are, if you are like me, you're probably not going to be buying the 7-lens set, and if you are going to pick up one of these lenses, it's probably going to be your only one. So if you are going to be matching it with other lens, you want to match it with a warmer lens. Now, if you're like me, you guys love a lens that has some beautiful flaring. But before we talk about that, we do have to discuss the front element of the Vista One. Now, the big differentiator between the Vista One and the Vista Prime is that the Vista One is a single coated lens, opposed to the Vista Prime being a dual coated lens. What this single coating does is that it allows the Vista One to have a bit of a vintage feel without losing the resolution or sharpness and clarity that you would experience with a vintage lens. So with the Vista One, we do experience more bluish to purple flares, which I think balances very nicely with the warmer tone of the lens, opposed to the Vista Prime, where you're going to get more greenish blue flares. Now, unlike the Tokina ATX zooms that I tested a few months back, you don't get that starburst, unpredictable flare, which honestly I did like depending on the situation, but you get a very clean and smooth flare with the Vista One. And again, like I mentioned, it is more of the bluish purple flaring, which makes it a lot easier to adjust the color of your flares. Basically, anytime you're doing color grading, blue and purple is a lot easier to adjust than a green. So as you guys may see in the samples here, the flaring on the Vista One is just absolutely gorgeous in my personal opinion. Next up, we're gonna talk about everyone's favorite lens characteristic, and that's the bokeh. When I shared screenshots of the test footage of the bokeh on the Driven Films Discord community, one of the members described the bokeh as buttery, smooth sex. And quite frankly, I have to agree. Now, the way that I would personally describe the bokeh from the Vista One is that it renders very organically, but also consistent at the same time, but very, very smooth. Personally, I do agree that the bokeh from the Vista One is buttery smooth sex, but I'd like to know how you guys would describe the bokeh from the Vista One down in the comments below. An additional feature or characteristic of that single coated front element is that it does provide a bit of a diffused or soft look for highlights or light sources. Ultimately, the diffusion is something that I absolutely loved when it came to the Vista One. In fact, you guys may have seen in the past that I have shot with diffusion filters, especially when it comes to using one of my sharper lenses. And I feel that diffusion adds a bit of character and it gives it some personality. And I think that it helps to soften a bit of the harshness of hard light sources. So personally, I really do enjoy the fact that the single coated front element allows for a bit of that diffusion to shine through on these lenses. When it comes to clarity, normally on an uncoated or single coated lens, you would see some drop off in resolution or sharpness, but Tokina did an excellent job with the coating on this lens in my personal opinion. I don't like a super soft image, but I also don't like a clinically sharp image. I feel that there is a bit of a middle ground, and the Vista One series, thanks to its single front coating, definitely hits the mark. Now, based on what I've shot here, in my personal opinion, I feel that the Vista One is aiming to provide the nice flaring, diffusion of the highlights, and character that you would get on a vintage lens without sacrificing the clarity or sharpness. While a lot of people do enjoy or prefer the look of vintage lenses, I personally found this to be a very good balance between a more clinical lens and a vintage lens. I would call it the middleman between the two. And I think that it does everything that I mentioned extremely well. You get little to no noticeable chromatic aberration. In fact, you have to be a crazy pixel peeper to notice any sort of chromatic aberration whatsoever. And there is no focus breathing. The lens is built extremely well and it has some really nice character to it. Personally, I cannot afford this lens right now. It is an $8,000 lens and I cannot fit it into the budget at the moment. However, I will be renting this lens to shoot on in the near future for some new projects coming up. If you guys enjoyed this video, please do me a huge favor and hit that like button and share this video on social media, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, whatever it may be. Sharing this video helps to keep this channel growing. Also, if you are not already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more lens reviews just like the one you watched right here. Until next time, take care.